All right. So what do you say if today we go ahead and start with our final session on the magic of the runes? Today we are going to cover the runes LAF, Not, and GIBUR. And we want you to know that we're going to be learning some things that are just a little bit different. Let's go ahead and lock this mouse right here because we're not going to be using it. Very well. So today we're going to be learning about the rune knot and how is it that the rune knot teaches us about karma. We're going to learn how to negotiate our karma. How is it that we can spare ourselves from significant suffering. And we are also going to speak about the story about ants and bees and how is it that unnegotiable, unforgivable karma comes into play. We're going to cover the rune LAF, and the rune LAF will emphasize how is it that we can break free from spiritual bondage, embracing true knowledge through the magic of the sexual alchemy. And we're going to speak about the rune GIBUR, and the rune GIBUR representing the sacred force of transformation. How is it that as a swastika, because the swastika is indeed a sacred symbol that has been misused by mankind, how is it that we can use it to harness divine energy by working with the flow of our creative waters? So let's go ahead and start with the magic of the runes, and this is the rune LAF. LAF appears as Lagus in the Elder Futhark, which is the most ancient runic alphabet. And LAF means water, it means lake, or it means sea. In any case, it is associated with water. And by now, at this level of studies, we know that anything associated with water speaks on our ability to adapt to circumstances, to be able to flow with the current, to be like an undine of water and move with it without being affected by the element itself. So LAF signifies flow, intuition. It speaks of emotions, of adaptability, and it certainly speaks about the force of life. And esoterically, LAF is linked to superior emotion, but superior emotion not as in superior of you feeling happy or good for others, because that is still fairly superficial. We're speaking here about superior emotion in terms of the manifestations of the superior emotional center. Let's remember that our physical machine has 5 fundamental centers. There is a motor, sexual, and instinctive center. The motor center exists at the base of the neck. The instinctive center exists at the base of the spine, and we know that the sexual center exists at the level of the creative organs. But then there is an emotional center that exists around 3 fingers above the navel. That emotional center right there in the solar plexus is what is known as the enteric system. And science has demonstrated that as a neural network, it contains as many neurons as the brain of a small cat. So we cannot just forgo that gut feeling, because when the emotional center communicates, well, that is a telepathic center, and it is indeed sharing some good information. And then there is the intellectual center that is located in our head. These are 5 basic centers. These are 5 lower centers in this house that is the philosophical earth. And inside the head, we have a superior emotional and a superior intellectual center. And these are the 2 higher centers that we're seeking to work with when we operate with the magic of the runes. So this is esoterically related to that superior emotional center, to that superior emotion. And with it, the occult knowledge, the wisdom that comes with these sacred teachings, and then the adaptability of us taking them and bringing them to use in our practical life. But if you happen to be part of an exercise of divination and you come across the rune LAF, well, LAF is telling you that you must surrender to the flow of events, that you must learn to adapt yourself to the circumstances, or it may indicate that you are being successful in the way that you are adapting. So depending on what is that internal state at the moment that you may come across that exercise, you will know what LAF is telling you. Because LAF will also tell you about the need to trust your intuition. Let's not forget that in the superior emotional and the superior intellectual centers, the great masters, the being, the different parts of the being will communicate with the consciousness, and they communicate directly through those centers. But Dr. Arnold Krumheller, master Viracocha, which Samael mentions in so many of his works, he has written about LAF in his book, his works on the Curso de Runas, or the Course of Runes, the following. He has associated an astrological correspondence with the element of Taurus. And as you may remember from our zodiacal course, when we're speaking about Taurus, Taurus is a constellation that is governed by the element of Earth. And Earth by itself speaks of stability, of emotional stability. An emotional stability that certainly goes very well with our ability to adapt with the circumstances. And Viracocha says that LAF means life. So what does he say about how is it that we can put to work and practice this rune? He says, as you're standing, your arms would be stretched out in front of you. And he says, concentrate on a glass of water and give that glass of water spiritual meaning. So if you can imagine, if you can see yourself with your arms forward as you're directing them towards a glass of water, you would be reciting the following prayer. With this water, I cleanse my inner being of all impurity to receive man, the cosmic being, the cosmic force. And as you repeat that prayer several times, we have seen that Dr. Krumheller is very consistent saying, do this exercise 7 times. Well, as you do that, then you will be consuming that water. But Master Samael always takes these teachings way further. By now, at this level, we have already learned about conjurations, we have learned about invocations, and of course, we have also learned about the magical practice of the exorcism of the elements. We do not need to do this. You are certainly invited to do as you choose, but we do not need to do this because there is some superior practice that we can also put into use. But it's good to know what Dr. Krumheller teaches with his foundational teachings of Rosicrucians. But let me share with you then a story from Master Samael Aumbeor. Samael starts by saying, I left this physical body for a while. In the parallel universe of the 5th dimension, I felt the intimate need to invoke a master, and I cried out loudly, calling, pleading, and asking. For an instant, it seemed the entire universe had been transformed. Continues by saying, as I was advancing along the mysterious path that leads the initiates to the gates of the holiest place, I was full of ecstasy when I unexpectedly saw myself attacked by a great beast, a Mithriac bull, terrifying in a great way. See here, Taurus represented in this experience of Master Samael Aumbeor, Taurus that relates to the rune LAF. He continues by saying, I tell you, dear reader, that I did not feel afraid. I faced the animal resolutely and threw it. I took it by the horns and then I threw it on the ground. However, at those precise moments, something unusual happened. An iron chain fell before me. It fell before my astonished consciousness, and the terrible animal disappeared as if by magic. In those moments, I intuitively understood everything. It was clear that I needed to set myself free, break enslaving chains, and eliminate the animal ego. And then I continued my way and I entered the temple doors. I felt intoxicated by an exquisite spiritual bliss. And what happened next, the gods know well. And now I tell it to men. I saw the chariot of the centuries. Samael says that in this golden chariot, this Merkaba, there were 3 masters of the White Lodge, and one venerable old man was present in the chariot itself. He says, that old man, he had a forehead that was undeniably high and majestic. He had a straight, flawless nose, slender, delicate lips, small, composed ears, and his white beard illuminated by light. Her pristine white hair gently fell to his shoulders. This is why he speaks. And one of the other venerable masters in the chariot told Samael, this is Peter. Peter, as in that great master, the Apostle Peter. Samael, full of that spiritual voluptuousness, he says, oh God, I prostrated on the ground before this ancient man of the centuries, and he, full of infinite love and compassion, blessed me, speaking in the sacred tongue. And since then, I have reflected a lot, and I will never regret teaching humanity the gospel of Peter, which is my tuna. Peter comes from patar, and patar means stone. This maituna, this is the secret of the super dynamic of love. This is the intimate work that is practiced in the ninth sphere within the flaming forge of Vulcan, so that each one of us can chisel its own stone of the philosophers. The very same stone that Nicolas Flamel and so many other alchemists spoke about. Samael, as part of this work, remember, this is part of that Christmas message of the year 1968, 1969, he comes back and he says, there is a work from Wolfram de Eisenbach regarding the holy stone and the white brotherhood that protects this stone, that protects this holy grail. He says, a stone animates those heroes. Do you know its noble and pure essence? These are the words of Wolfram. It is called lapis electrix, the magnus. By it, all the marvels, he is referring to magic, can be performed. And she, the stone, like the phoenix that plunges into the flames, is reborn from its own ashes, every time emerging more powerful, more beautiful, more majestic. And Wolfram of Eisenbach refers to the practitioner. He says, his power is such that any man, however unhappy he may be in his state, instead of dying like the others, no longer knows his age, neither by his color nor by his face, and whether man or woman will enjoy the ineffable joy of contemplating the stone for more than 200 years. Wolfram of Eisenbach speaks here, of course, in symbols. It was necessary to speak in symbols because this was at a time that the wisdom was occult, hidden. Now, what's not only occult as in esoteric, just for the few, but it had to be kept hidden because there was some serious consequence of anyone who spoke of anything different. That was the direction of those leaders on what were supposed to be the spiritual norms and the spiritual practices. So he shares here in these very subtle symbols the wisdom of Peter, which is the wisdom of the super dynamic of love. And because the rune LAF is associated with waters, because it is associated with Taurus, that speaks about that emotional stability, because LAF speaks about intuition, about awakening those superior centers within the human machine, well, it indicates that there is a superior work that must be needed to achieve that. Allow me to share with you this image. We were able to source this image out of BBC, and what you see here is a rune stone that exists in Oklahoma in the United States. And Samael says, it is tremendously significant that the laftar, the rune LAF, that means savior, is engraved on the stones in North America and America. This picture, as you can see, This is a picture from the year 1928 where this lady, her name is Gloria Farley, is here with her two sons. And we have been able to find this, of course, as part of BBC, but the credit goes to the Oklahoma Historical Society. Notice Viking runes, Nordic runes in a stone in Oklahoma. And in there, we find the rune LAF. If you would allow me to direct your attention, notice that among the runes engraved on the stone, there is one that appears as a letter M. But that is not an M. Those are two rune LAFs together, standing in this posture. That is a man and a woman. In that union, it speaks about that mystery of Maituna, of the wisdom of Peter. So what does Samael say? He says, it is clear and very true that only by following the path of the perfect matrimony can the wedding garment of the soul be achieved, the perfect synthesis of the solar bodies. And friends, we cannot speak of the rune LAF without speaking about the rune Not and speaking about the rune GIBUR, so that we can integrate all this wisdom and truly comprehend the hidden message that exists behind it. So let's go ahead and, in terms of the rune LAF and the powers of LAF, how do we bring this together into something that is useful? I want you to know that the corresponding practice of the rune LAF, you will excuse me a second, I have to sneeze. Sorry. Excuse me. Thank you. The practice corresponding to the rune LAF consists of a very simple exercise that is done in the mornings, and it's done in the mornings only once in the month. This is an exercise that takes place only on the 27th of each month in the morning, because every month on the 27th, we initiate a new solar cycle. So this practice, again, once a month on the 27th. And what do? As the sun is rising early in the morning, as the sun is ascending in the east, we will approach that event with our heart open, with the greatest of devotion, and we will invoke our innermost in the same way that we have learned how to do. Divine Father, we're here humbly at your presence, and we ask of you, we beg of you that you officiate in this practice. We hear, invoke, we ask of your grace, and we ask of your help. And then you state your petition. But specific to the rune LAF, what do we ask? We ask, allow us to awaken our superior centers. Allow us to experience the manifestation of your superior emotion. Bring us the wisdom to comprehend the occult knowledge, the ability to apply it, to put it to use in our daily life, and give us the necessary opportunities so that we may demonstrate adaptability to the changing circumstances. Adaptability to the circumstances, adaptability to the ordeals, the challenges that we may face. And in that posture, we only offer that sincere prayer. But we do not get there with our hands empty. We get there with our hearts full of devotion. We get there with the effort that we have done during the month in our self-observation, in the comprehension, in seeking to comprehend and eliminate all of these inferior aspects that exist in our psyche. Seeking a transformation into a higher, superior level of being. And with that work, we get there with the work of that effort, with the product of those sacrifices in our hands. And that is what we offer our innermost. And that is why our hands are open as we receive the sun and we invoke the prayer and we breathe and we see ourselves saturating ourselves with all of that solar cosmic Christic energy that reaches every atom, every particle of our being to awaken the consciousness. And once we're done, we cross our arms on our chest And we give thanks to our innermost, and we give thanks to our Divine Mother. And as always, we close every practice in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. We make the sign of the microcosmic star by the Almighty and powerful. We trace the magical circle, tetragrammaton, and we close it with the rune sig, just the index finger like a lightning. That is how we close all of our works of magic. So this is the rune LAF. It helps us with the awakening of the superior intellectual center, with the awakening of the superior emotional center, giving us the ability to perceive, to comprehend, to empower the consciousness, to receive that occult wisdom, that occult knowledge, and of course, to adapt into the circumstances and to be able to flow. This is the rune LAF. But there are times during our days that we come across some very difficult circumstances. Give me an opportunity. Thank you. We come across some very difficult circumstances. We're facing challenges in life, ordeals, whether they have to do with finances or politics or matrimonies or children or family or work. There's a combination of so many factors that come together that at times we feel ourselves a little overwhelmed. Sometimes we find ourselves experiencing the consequences of our previous actions. That is the fundamental Hermetic principle of cause and effect. That is the law of karma. And there is no need for any one of us to be stuck in sufferings. There is no need for any one of us to be going back in time in our previous experiences and reliving them in our mind and being consumed by sometimes feelings of shame or defeatism or etc. that bring us down to our knees. And as they do that, they make us feel unworthy or No, there is no need for that. We must learn to transcend those sufferings, and that is why we have been given the magic of the rune knot. In terms of the origin, the significance, and the meaning of this rune, the rune knot appears as a naudis or naudis in the Elder Futhark. Again, that is the oldest runic alphabet. And knot literally means need or necessity. But there's something deeper behind it. The rune knot indicates karmic lessons or necessary struggles that must be endured. If at any moment you happen to go through an exercise of divination, we would always encourage you to learn to read the tarot, the Egyptian tarot. We do have a series of lectures in which you can learn profoundly the meaning of all those arcana so that you can do that. But if you happen to be in a divination with runes, and that rune knot shows up, it is indicating that you are right there facing karmic lessons or that there are necessary struggles that you must learn to overcome. The rune knot emphasizes patience, resilience, willpower, serenity, peace of mind, calmness, silence of thought. All of that is necessary for us to be able to overcome challenges. This rune may also give you a warning of a possible danger, of an oppression that may be coming your way. But these are dangers and oppressions that are not random, based on the law of recurrence, that law that states that everything that happened before in those past lives will happen again, with the consequences, the good ones and the bad ones. Well, that something is coming back because of our previous actions. And this rune suggests to us that through struggle, by learning to navigate these events, by us learning to observe, to see ourselves reflected in the mirror that are others, we can gain wisdom and we can gain strength. So if there is a takeaway from the rune knot, is that struggles are part of growth. I mean, Samael says, the water will not boil if it is not at 100 degrees. Arcanum 65 of the tarot, which is the arcanum of learning, it says, he who brings wisdom brings pain day or night for his own good. So these are events that we must learn to go through. After all, we caused them at some point. We need to learn what is it that we did. We need to learn how to handle them so that we can overcome them. And as we work on the elimination of these psychological aggregates, as we comprehend them and invoke of the power of the Divine Mother to see them eliminated, as we can make progress into superior levels of being, what will happen is that these events will not repeat themselves. I mean, if we eliminate those elements of the ego, Samael says if there are no actors, the dramas cannot play. But what is it that Master Viracocha says about the rune knot? He identifies an astrological correspondence with the constellation of Capricorn. And one thing that we know about the natives of Capricorn is that they are melancholic. The natives of Capricorn, they have a tremendous ability to be able to see the suffering consequences about things. It is fairly common of them to look at things and to notice the bad stuff that can happen. That is a tremendous ability. And that should speak volumes to us, because this astrological correspondence is helping us overcome those inferior limitations so that we can learn to find the good in the bad, as well as detecting the bad that exists within the good. Dr. Krumheller, he says, this rune means danger. But, because there's a big but here, but it is the power to reject that danger. So wow, that means that we can use this rune and defend ourselves. We can use this rune and use it to shield ourselves from these dangers so that we are not negatively influenced. We don't just crumble before them, and that we can stand above the circumstance, contemplate, comprehend, and through a power superior of the mind, that is that fire of Kundalini, bring about the elimination of those defects. Just by doing that, we are empowering that intimate Christ that exists within each and every one of us to start manifesting. This is part of that mystery that is called the mystery of the Salvador Salvandus, the Savior that saves itself. And Viracocha tells us, karma is not blind. It can be exhausted through good deeds and magic. And this does not injure justice. Listen to this. Karma is not blind. This is not a mechanical law that is applied just like that. This is something that can be exhausted through good deeds and magic. Now, we should clarify here, because this idea of exhausting karma by magic, this is not throwing spells or incantations or things of the sort. No. Karma is a superior law. From the moment that the Father of all lights crystallizes in creation, from that moment forward, the law of cause and effect is active. So this transcends us. For us, it's called karma. For the gods, it is called katancia. That magic is the super dynamic of love. That magic that Viracocha is speaking here, he did not have the authority, the permission that was given to Master Samael to unveil the arcanum, to just speak openly about this magic. But what he is meaning there, this is the work in the Forge of Vulcan. This is the work in the ninth sphere. And working in the ninth sphere helps us pay tremendous amounts of karma, because we're working to transmute those creative energies, to fabricate superior existential bodies of the being. But we'll cover more on that when we speak about the rune GIBUR. Krumheller says, the occult powers that man receives, he achieves them because of his gaining of virtues and homogeneous vibrations. Those homogeneous vibrations are those of the consciousness with the being. Let's never forget that the consciousness is a fraction of the human soul, of our spirit, of the innermost. And that fraction gets sent out, and it is what is incarnated in each and every one of us. If you're here listening to this, it's because that spark of that human soul of the innermost is active. It is because that magnetic center is active, and it's attracting the wisdom. So he says, those so-called powers that man has, they are a function. They are proportional to those virtues and homogeneous vibrations. If you have those virtues, if you have those homogeneous vibrations manifesting within you, those powers will become very evident. And the more are the virtues that you express, the virtues of the innermost, well, the higher will be the quality of those superior powers. And he says, otherwise, if you don't have that, if you don't have the virtues, if your consciousness is disconnected from the innermost, then those powers are not going to take effect. But here, this rune, it means danger, but in it we find the power to reject it. So what is it that he says in terms of practice? He says, make sure the corresponding sound, because there are mantric syllables in the rune knot, or vibration goes to the tips of your fingers, thinking it awakens defensive and protected forces in us. This is what Dr. Krumheller says. How do we practice? Well, we're standing and we're facing east. Like in any work of magic, we invoke the innermost. Father, let it be you who officiates. Let it be you who chants these mantric syllables. Let them resonate throughout the cosmos. Let it be you who exercises this practice. And once we're standing, we will extend our arms to the side and we will tilt our arms 45 degrees. That way, one arm is at 45, the other one is like at 135. Anyway, our arms are going to be straight, and we are alternating them so that each one of them reaches a height of 45 degrees, like you are the arms of a scale. Do you see that? When we are putting this into practice, we will sing the mantric syllables, and notice the sequence in which Dr. Krumheller says that these must be chanted. We start with the vowel I, that sounds E, because that is for those magnetic centers in the head. Sahasrara and Ajna, the third eye and the crown. Ni. Ne. The E is for the creative larynx. The creative larynx is what gives us the magic ear, the faculty of clairaudience. No. The O vibrates the heart chakra, the center of intuition, imagination, inspiration. No. U is for the solar plexus, the center of telepathy. Na. The A vibrates the thymus gland right there near the cardias. The heart chakra vibrates as well with the A, the O, and the A. And right there, in that thymus gland, that gives us the faculty of long life. So notice the way that Viracocha recommends ni, ne, no, nu, and na. This is what he recommends. But of course, with this work on the esoteric treatise on the magic of the runes, Samael takes this wisdom so much more deeper. And he tells us, karma can be forgiven when a higher law transcends a lower one. However, some cases represent irredeemable karma. That irredeemable karma, that karma that cannot be negotiated, is called karma duro. Once karma duro strikes, it cannot be negotiated, and we must go through it. So karma duro are all of those sins that we commit against the Holy Spirit. Perhaps you have heard this before, as it has been written, all sins will be forgiven except the sins against the Holy Spirit. Those result in karma duro. And of course, those actions that lead to karma duro, it's in our best interest to avoid them, to find the root cause behind them, those psychological aggregates that exist, so that we can uproot them and hand them over to our Divine Mother by comprehending them and see them, eliminating them. And Samael shares with us a beautiful story to explain the effect of this irredeemable karma or karma duro. And he says, this is a very, very fun story, because Samael says that one day they were driving to the Federal District of Mexico, and he was in the car, one of his students of name Rafael. He had this car, and the car was old, and car was pretty much riding its last miles. And as they were driving, well, the car would usually overheat, so they would have to stop on the side of the road to get water and just add water to the radiator and cool the car off. So listen to the story. Samael says, we were coming to the Federal District in a dilapidated vehicle. And along the way, we stopped in the shade of a tree to pour water on it and cool it down. This was a task of my friend Raphael. I prefer to take advantage of those moments to immerse myself in deep meditation. As he is sitting next to a tree, he notices that there are some ants. And he says, I saw some insignificant, industrious, and diligent ants circulating everywhere. I decided to put my mind in order and focus exclusively on one of those ants. And as he gets into this deep state of meditation, and he is able to unfold in his astral body, he comes across the monad of the ant. For practical purposes, let's think of the monad as the consciousness, the soul of the ant itself. Samael continues by saying, it is obvious to understand the directing monad is certainly not incarnated, inserted within the ant's body. The monad lives outside of the physical body of a creature like the ants, but that monad is connected to the ant through something that is known as the silver cord or the silver thread, which is the thread of Antakarana. Just like when we unfold in our astral body, and we always come back into the physicality, every time that we're having a dream, we already know that that is an astral experience. And when we wake up in the morning, that lunar soul comes back into the body. It comes back into the body because our soul is bound to the physicality through the thread of Antakarana. And the thread of Antakarana has the ability to extend itself from here to the limits of infinity. And the only one that can cut the thread of Antakarana is the angel of death. When the angel of death does its job and severs that thread, the soul cannot come back into the body, and thus the physical body dies. Of course, there's a shock that happens, but we have discussed that already in our lecture on the transmigration of the souls. So this monad that Samael sees, he is saying, is connected to the little body of the ant, but it is not incarnated in the ant itself. And that is very interesting. He continues by saying, that monad of the insignificant ant, observed so carefully, seemed like a beautiful 12-year-old girl. She was dressed in a beautiful white tunic and carried a small, dark blue cape. So Samael invokes her. And he speaks to the monad of one of these ants. And as he speaks, that monad shares the following. The lords of karma have punished us ants, and we suffer a lot. The same thing happens with the bees. It so happens that these creatures that we see today as ants, they are the remnant, what is left behind of humanities that existed before the polar race inhabited the earth. We already spoke about the 7 races. The polar, the protoplasmic or polar race, the Hyperboreans, the Lemurians, the Atlanteans, the 5th race, that is us, the Aryan race. And this is of a race of humans that existed before the polar race existed on Earth. And being that ancient, well, that is a humanity that was clear with the understanding on the distinction between what are actions that are constructive and contribute and what are actions that do not. What, in our terms, if we can speak of this like this today, which is like very polarizing, but for the sake of understanding, the difference between good and between evil. And they were evolved. But even though they were evolved, they never entered the path of the revolution of the consciousness, which is to take those creations that the consciousness will manifest in ignorance, comprehend them, and eliminate them, bring them to their rightful end. To work with those creative energies within to fabricate the superior existential bodies of the being that the innermost needs as the wedding garment of the soul. And of course, the sacrifice and the service to others. That's the revolution of the consciousness. But they decided to not work on that. And because they didn't, they renounced the idea of higher knowledge, and they renounced the consideration of joining the esoteric circle of life of those great masters. Simply, they disconnected. They settled their faith in materialism. And because they did, they started a process of involution. And in that process of involution, they became regressive creatures, and ultimately they modified their physical organism. There is a very interesting writing by Maurice Metternich. Metternich earned the Nobel Prize in Literature back in 1911. And to his credit, there is a book that is called The Life of Termites. La vie des termites. Excuse me, those of you who speak French and how bad I speak it. The Life of the Termites. He writes in his book, the gods of communism become insatiable Molochs. Now he's saying here communism. Let's think that this is written back at the very beginning of the 20th century. Okay? Let's expand on what is it that he means. Because when he's speaking about communism, he's speaking about an extreme form of regimentation. We're not speaking here about a political type of communism. We're speaking here about an extreme form of regimentation and a rigid, hierarchical, and self-sacrifice mode of living. That is what he means. Explaining that so that we don't get caught in the politics stuff. So these gods of this high regiment, of all of this hierarchical, self-sacrificing way of living, they became insatiable Molochs. They persist and demand until the individual dies and their misery is complete. And even though that happens, no one benefits in the anthill. In the condition that they live, Metternich says, it is unclear where the rules and laws come from. These rules and laws that lead them to social fatalism. For them, there is no such a thing as rest. There is no rest except in death. Sickness is not tolerated, and weakness carries the death penalty. Just imagine living in a society like that. Weakness is not tolerated. There's no rest until you die. It takes the extremes of cannibalism and even copophagia. Copophagia is consuming of excrement. And even while this is happening, no one benefits from this. They demand the sacrifice and the misery of many for the benefit and the happiness of no one. What? This is a crushing downward spiral of existence. Metternich says they used to have wings, but they don't have them anymore. I guess there may be some ant species that may still have some wings. But they used to have wings and they don't have them anymore. They had eyes and they renounced them. They had a sexuality, they sacrificed it. So they have become, for all practical purposes, a completely mechanical entity of which the monad does not partake. The monad is bound to that machine, and that machine lives, does not stop, suffers, and it gets rest when it dies. And when it dies, it gets eaten by others. What? To all of this, Samael says, we can only now add that before sacrificing their wings, their sights, and their sexuality, the white ants, and all of them in general, had to sacrifice their intelligence. Now, this is very profound here. Sacrificed their intelligence. Sacrificed the ability to discern. On knowing how to think. Not what to think, but on knowing how to think. Diacritical thinking. All of that was given away. At first, an iron dictatorship was needed to establish this abominable communism, this abominable hierarchical relationship of self-sacrifice where there's only the extreme manifestation of benefiting no one. And after they were shocked with that iron dictatorship of which they relinquished their intelligence and they started thinking what others told them to, that intelligence gradually degenerated. It became atrophied and everything became automatic. Samael tells us when contemplating a beehive, when contemplating ant hive, we only regret that there is no intelligence and everything has become mechanical. This is what Samael says. So this is an example of unforgivable karma. There is no opportunity for any one of those monads to invoke the archons of karma and ask for some kind of forgiveness, for some kind of negotiation to get out of that state. No, they must continue because that is what they have earned. And by the end of time, whatever defines the end of time of those colonies, then that monad will be set free. But let's look at an example of karma that is negotiable, forgivable karma. Samael shares with us a beautiful story when he invokes and he speaks to his Divine Mother. And he says that in one of those nights of Urania, he is able to unfold and he invokes of his Divine Mother, and his Divine Mother presents herself. He sits within the astral plane, he sits right next to her. And he is profoundly moved in a deep state of spiritual ecstasy with the majesty, the beauty, the emanation of love, the presence of his Divine Mother. And he has a conversation with her. And he says, Mother, I ask for your forgiveness. I ask for your forgiveness on the crimes that I have committed in past lives, because you know very well that with this work that we're doing, with the sacrifice for humanity, with what is happening, you know that I would never do those things again. And his Divine Mother forgives him. What Samael is telling us there is that our Divine Mother has the power to forgive our karmas. As a matter of fact, in very high grade rituals, There are rituals in which the Divine Mother speaks and she says, I have forgiven my son so many times that sometimes I have to leave the palaces of justice to not be trampled by the law of karma. That's how much the Divine Mother sacrificed for us. But she forgives his past transgressions, and with that, the karma that comes with it. Samael says that as she did that, within him, within his being, there was a restoration of an inner tranquility, an inner peace, and then he asked for her blessing, and she blessed them as well. As she blessed them, he fell on her knees, and he says that he kissed her feet. And at that moment, and not before, the Divine Mother gave him a symbol. And with that symbol, he comprehended that there was some mystery about the ritual of the washing of the feet. That has to do with forgiveness. That ritual that the great master Yeshua practices with his apostles. And Samael says, I was able to get this blessing, to restore this tranquility and peace, to gain forgiveness for those past crimes, because I had dissolved the ego, the pluralized ego within the mineral region, but I came to see that there was work that was still pending, work that still needed to be done. And he continues by saying, I no longer owe karma, but I must pay taxes to the lords of the law, because nothing is given for free. Friends, if you have the cosmic capital, you can negotiate your karma. And the only way that we can negotiate, that we can gain that cosmic capital is by working intensely in the super dynamic of love, and of course, in quote unquote good deeds. Sacrifice for humanity. Help feed the ones who are hungry. Help dress the ones who are lacking clothes. Help provide shelter to the ones who don't have it. Help educate, bring the light of this wisdom, not because you're just out there saying things, but bring the light of this wisdom because your actions bring that light. Because your actions, your thoughts, your sentiments are constantly, consistently righteous, reflective of the inner work that you're doing. That's how we bring light. When we do that, we have the opportunity to see karma eliminated. The Master says, everything has a price and the right to live in this world must be paid. I pay with good works. And so should we. Not expect just to get things because we're asking. No. The great law does not take anything more than it demands of you. No, it does not take a penny more and it does not give you back a penny more than what you deserve. That's the way that the law operates. So Samael says, I have presented then two cases for consideration of my readers. Irremediable karma, like what happened to the ants, to the bees, and forgivable karma. And we can benefit with the forces of the rune knot to negotiate and see of our karma forgiven. Listen to this. I need you to listen to this because there are many students who are in these practices, and it is true. There are many students that are attacked severely by the dark entities. This is true. We know this. I mean, we cannot be fanatical thinking that everyone is against us and that everyone is a witch or a sorcerer and that everyone is doing black magic. No, because that is just fanatical. But the facts are the facts and we must say it. The fact is that dark ones are constantly challenging those who walk the path of the razor's edge. And that is the path of the blade that we are seeking to walk when we walk into Gnosis. Because the fact is that there are dangers behind every corner. And because those dark ones are constantly challenging, they bring about unspeakable sufferings. I mean, they can be a pain in the neck. But we don't have to complain about that because that is their job. How do you demonstrate mastery if it is not going through the adversity? The only way that you can celebrate walking out with your PhD is by going through the hardships of all of those 5 years of postgraduate studies and everything that you did before. Nobody just gets a PhD because somebody knocks on the door. It doesn't happen like that. The same thing happens with mastery in life. So these dark ones, they constantly are forcing sufferings. They create enmities between you and your neighbors. They create enmities in the family. Mental formations that just create clashes between you and your children, your parents, and people at work. That happens. They create psychic obsessions. People just focus on stuff and they only obsess about that and they don't have inner peace. No, we don't need that. Samael says, you can and must defend yourself with the rune knot. And this is why we have this rune. We can seek help and we can ask Anubis and the 42 judges of the courts of karma to consider our negotiations. And friends, if you can negotiate. But don't forget, you have to pay back. And we pay back with good deeds. And we pay back with the practice of that super dynamic of love. Transmuting those creative energies and fabricating the superior existential bodies of the being. That is beautiful work. But if you don't have a spouse, that's fine. Focus on doing good deeds. Because if you don't pay back, the law will demand what you owe. And then it's not going to be the suffering that the dark ones are throwing, because that's something that you can handle. Then you have to deal with karma. And karma, if you don't pay with good deeds, Samael says you must pay with supreme pain. But he also says we should not complain about karma. Don't complain about it. If you complain about karma, it gets worse. Karma is negotiable. And if you have the resources for good deeds, I mean, you have this wisdom, there's plenty of opportunity out there to exercise good deeds, well, then you can pay. And then you don't need to experience any pain. Isn't that wonderful? Let's not be afraid of negotiating karma. Some people say, I don't want to forget and then have more pain later. Let me keep going this way. No, that is silly. That is retrograde thinking. If you have the tools, use them, but be responsible using them. So how is it that we get the most from this in the rune knot? For us to practice the rune knot, we must combine the rune knot with an exercise of pranayama. Pranayama, the harnessing of the winds. Pranayama is an exercise of transmuting sexual creative energy. We are seeking to separate those solar and lunar atoms that exist within the enseminis, or sexual creative waters, and see those atoms flowing up those channels in the spine, Ida and Pingala, those two serpents in the caduceus of Mercury that exist in us, and bring that transmuted energy into the chalice of the brain. That's what we're seeking to do. So when it comes to pranayama, 12 count. 12 count means that you're going to be breathing in slow enough that you can count to 12. I mean, if you cannot do it now, don't despair. If you cannot count to 12, if you can count to 5 or 6, count to 5 and 6, but strive to get to 12. You cover one nostril, you breathe in, count to 12, close, and exhale the other side, exhaling to 12. You see, this pranayama is different. This is not Christic Egyptian pranayama. That's a different practice. For this one, 12 count, inhale, cover, breathe. Hold, cover, let go, exhale. And we're going to do that for 10 minutes. But we're not just going to sit there and cover and breathe and cover, exhale, cover, release, cover, release. We're not going to do that mechanically. We have to bring consciousness into the effort. So what do? Whenever we're getting ready to do this, we always face east and we cross our arms on our chest and we invoke our Divine Father, saying, Divine Father, help us. Let it be you, the one who facilitates this exercise. Grant us of your grace. Aid us in the transmutation of these creative waters. Saturate our bodies with prana. breath of life. Help us so we may intelligently negotiate our karma. Let it be you, the one who presents itself at the courts of the great masters. You see? Let's always work through the innermost, because when we work through the innermost, when we work in the name of the Christ, we're not making the mistakes of falling in the space of black magic, asking to move forces of nature because we're fearful, because we're insecure. No, that's black magic. We don't want that. We don't need that anymore. So what do? We do pranayama for 10 minutes. And once we're done with those 10 minutes, you can sit down, but if you can, rest on your back. And as you're resting on your back, try to remember your past lives. How do you do that? Divine Father, we invoke you and we ask of you, bring into the eye of our mind those significant events of our past lives. Those events that will give us the clarity that is necessary at this moment. I mean, you do that enough before you realize you have so much that you can put, if you glue them together, you end up with a whole picture of your past life. So open yourself to that principle of spontaneity, so that when the innermost shows you something in the screen of the mind, that you see it, that you perceive it, you can say, Father, show it to me in such a way that it is clear that it is you, the one showing it. Show it in such a way, with so much insistence, that there is no other option than for my insignificant person to realize that you are showing me. That is what we must say. And if you need the assistance from Anubis, as you do that, well, if it becomes urgent, we're going to stand facing east in the form of the rune, and we're going to set our arms 45 degrees and 135. You see that? Good. And we're going to chant the mantras na, ne, ni, no, and no. This is slightly different from what Dr. Krumheller says. The wisdom that Samael gives is more profound. We share with you what Viracocha shares so that you can have a good perspective, so that you can have good balance in the teaching. But we are here to give you the wisdom of Samael Aumbeor. Na, ne, ni, no, no. Concentrate on Anubis. Na, ne, What are you doing in that exercise? You're not just moving your arms and making the noise, the singing of the mantric syllable. No, we want to concentrate in Anubis. We want to concentrate in this archon of karma. And also, we are using this exercise so that we can bring balance. We're singing na right there at the heart center. Bring balance at the heart. Ne, so we can bring balance into our creative larynx. Ni, so that we can bring balance into the centers of our head, where we can have the faculty of clairvoyance, omnipresence. No, back into the heart, intuition, imagination, inspiration. Nu, telepathy. Handling those extreme circumstances that require going back to the rune LAF, that emotional stability. And invoke Anubis. Implore the business that you are seeking. This slide says desire. This is not what we desire. The business that we long for. And ask for the urgent help. This is how we negotiate karma. And if you have a poor memory and you tend to forget things, if it has happened to you, that you say, God, please spare me this one, and I swear that I will never again go do that, whatever thing that is, And then you forget that when you're spared from the tragedy, then you forget and you go back to your old doings because you have bad memory. So that if you have bad memory like that, make sure that this negotiation, that you write it down in your Gnostic journal. Make sure that you write it in a very prominent place so that you don't forget that you must pay back. This is how we work with the rune knot. All right, let's go ahead and move on and let's finish with the rune GIBUR. The rune GIBUR is another very powerful rune. Everybody here is familiar with the rune GIBUR. And if you think you're not, just give me a second. GIBUR appears in the Elder Futhark, which is the most ancient runic alphabet, as Gebu. And it means gifts, it means generosity, and it means partnership. This is what the rune GIBUR means. This rune GIBUR indicates sacred bonds. It speaks of relationships, and it symbolizes balance, exchange, sacred bonds, generosity, luck. This rune is seen as a rune of love, friendship, and contracts, and it represents the exchange between the humans and the gods. Wow. This rune brings unexpected blessings and many fortunate circumstances. So if you happen to be in an exercise of divination and this rune shows up, right now you have a good indication on the power associated with this rune. But there's a warning that I would like to share with you. This rune has been used and is used by dark entities in love magic to enhance relationships. Okay? This rune has been used in practices of dark magic to attract prosperity and abundance. When we use this rune in dark ways, it brings very nefarious consequences. Because if somebody uses this rune as part of the dark arts to attract abundance and prosperity, it is not going to be as a gift from the universe, as a reward from the gods of karma, as a reward from perhaps the manifestation of Jupiter in a specific stage in your life, particularly when you are between 47 and 56. No. Using dark arts, it would be take away from others so that I can have it. And that brings back some very nefarious consequences. If it is love, you could be binding someone because of your fears, because of your desires, and that brings back nefarious consequences. And this is such a powerful rune that when it was used to its most power, in its most negative aspect, it gave rise to the Third Reich and everything that we have seen with Nazi Germany. Because this rune GIBUR is that swastika. But what you will see is that the swastika that is Nazi is flipped. It is the opposite. And as the opposite, it attracts all the same power, but in a negative way. In terms of runic wisdom, when it comes to the rune GIBUR, this rune states, what we give is what we receive. And it says mutual respect and generosity. So in terms of what we give is what we receive. When we give respect, that's what we get. When we are generous, we receive generosity. When we bring hate, when we bring discord, when we bring strife, we get back hate and discord and strife. What does Dr. Krumheller say about the rune GIBUR? He sets an astrological correspondence with the constellation of Cancer. And he says this rune symbolizes deceit, friends, and traitors. That's the incorrect use of the rune. This rune also means the return to God. It also means the divine light, and it has the power to reawaken the divine light in you. And Viracocha recommends a practice with this rune, just like for every other rune. He says, transverse position of the body. You kneel, you stretch your arms, shoulder height, your hands. And as you're kneeling with your arms in this posture, Dr. Krumheller says, sing the mantra Amenon 7 times. Amen. 7 times. But as you would expect, Samael comes to unveil wisdom, and he expands on this teaching, and he gives us so much more. And Samael, as part of his work, he comes to reveal the wisdom of the super dynamic of love, which is Maituna. And he tells us the rune GIBUR is a cross in action. Imagine that this is a cross that is spinning. And this is exactly what you see. And this swastika, again, it is not a symbol that belongs to the Third Reich and the Nazi Party. It is not. The swastika is a very sacred symbol, and we find it everywhere in the world where there has been serpentine knowledge. Serpentine, the wisdom of the serpent, the wisdom of fire, the work with fire and water in the 9th sphere, in the Forge of Vulcan. So you can see here in the screen some beautiful examples. The Navajo tribes, they embrace the swastika because those elders know of the powerful mysteries that exist behind the cross, this cross of marvelous destinies. You can see it in the Tibet, the Incas in Peru. You can see it among the Zoroastrians in the Middle East. You can see it among the Anglo-Saxons, the Thracians, the Koreans, etc., etc., etc. This rune is everywhere. And see it here at the very heart of Buddha. Dear friends, if we find this rune in the heart of the illuminated one, we cannot try to convince ourselves that this is a nefarious symbol. It is not. But I tell you again, I am not going to offer a single square inch in our materials to show the Nazi swastika. But what you will see is that the Nazi swastika is the reflection of this, is the shadow of this particular rune. And swastika, so that you know, it comes from the Sanskrit. The word swastika means to be fortunate. Su means well, and as of the astika, swastika, it means to be well, to be fortunate. This is what the swastika means. And we even see it among the Hindi tradition right there next to Ganesha. This image of Ganesha is truncated because I'm covering it here on the screen, but it has both the swastika that brings light and the swastika that brings darkness. And it shows both with Ganesha in the middle because Ganesha is known as the remover of obstacles. He is the patron of arts, of sciences. He is the deva of intellect and wisdom. And of course, as that deva of intellect and wisdom, which is a manifestation of our own consciousness, of our innermost, well, we need to have the discernment to know what contributes and what does not. We must know what adds value, what helps, what builds, what grows, and what destroys, what harms. We must know that. And this is what Ganesha gives us. And notice how beautiful that swastika appears here. And notice that there are 4 dots in the swastika. Those 4 dots remind us of the Yod He Vav He. They remind us of the tetra for grammaton. That Yod He Vav He, that Yod-Havah, Jehovah, that is a fusion of masculine and feminine principles. And we see the cross in motion in the practice of the super dynamic of love. Here we see every deity of that Tibetan pantheon united with his consort. We see every deity of the Aztec pantheon has a wife because the masculine and the feminine principles cannot exist on their own. They are both part of the divine and perfect androgen. And this is what the rune GIBUR is telling us. We must set these forces into motion. And to set them into motion, well, the greatest act that we can consume is that of Maituna, where in that sacred ritual, both man and woman come together and they unite to create, to fabricate. But it must be done intelligently because we are all given values to work with. And this is why we deliberately leave the rune GIBUR to the end. Because you and me and you, we are all given specific number of values. We're given intellectual values, emotional values, motor values, instinctive, sexual values. Think of these values as if they were coins that you can spend. These values that go into each one of our centers are there so that we can keep the centers in balance, so that we can be a balanced human being. Those values, we spoke of them in some previous lecture, and perhaps you remind them, we refer to them as bodbin caldenos. You remember? Bodbin caldenos. And we are all given these values. And among these values that we're given, at the level of our sexual creative organs, we are given seeds. The sun has deposited in us these solar seeds that are saturated with Christic substance, with substance of the Holy Spirit. And we must take this and make it fruitful. And so I am showing you here just a single verse from the book of Matthew, chapter 22, where we see the story of that king that asks one of his servants in a wedding to take a man who was there not wearing the right garments and to cast him outside into the outer darkness. He says, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In this wedding, just like in that wedding, at the weddings of Cana, where the great master Jesus was there present with his mother, Yeshua with the divine mother, they're both present. And the first miracle that he manifests is that of turning water into wine, of transmuting the waters of the personality into the wine of the Spirit. And we say this because we cannot possibly think that such a great master of such a great stature, Aparamarta Satya, like is the great master Jesus, that he's going to be giving alcohol to humans when we know how humans behave when they get drunk. Transmutation of the waters of the personality into the wine of the Spirit. And here we see the same wedding. But there is someone who is being cast outside because he is not dressed appropriately. That garment that is needed is the wedding garment of the innermost. Our innermost sends a fraction of its human soul, the consciousness, what we have incarnated within, so that here we can work with those substances and fabricate those bodies so that the innermost can have the ability to flow across all of the realms of creation. Because right now we cannot receive the being. We don't have the right vehicles to receive the being, and trying to receive the being with what we have in our physical body today is the equivalent of trying to run an ultra high voltage power line through the electrical circuits in your house. It's going to burn the house down. The same thing would happen. So what are these vehicles? We are seeking to fabricate the to soma heliakon. To soma heliakon are golden garments of the innermost. These are bodies that are made with that solar fire. That fire of Kundalini that becomes fecundated within each and every one of us. And to do that, the only way that we can do it is by transmuting the sexual creative waters and working intensely in the ninth sphere. There is something called the Soma Puchikon, or the To Soma Puchikon. That is the Christified ethereal body. Soma Puchikon is a Christified ethereal body that grants you access into all the departments of the kingdom. But that is not sufficient, beyond that stone, beyond that philosopher's stone, that is not made of the two superior ethers, as Max Heindel had believed. We have to take that Christified ethereal body and continue working until we fabricate the wedding garments of the innermost. And that is a solar astral body, a solar mental body, a solar causal body. And beyond that, a body for the illuminated soul and the body of Atman, the body of the innermost. If we combine those five with the work that must happen with those serpents of fire in the physical and the ethereal body, we have to deal with 7 serpents of fire to do that. That is the work of the first mountain. We will cover that at another time. But the work for that is described in the rune GIBUR, in the union of the vertical and the horizontal elements of the cross. The masculine phallus and the feminine ecteris. Those two together in action, as they're spinning, they give shape to the rune GIBUR. And that is the swastika. That swastika is that Amen that seals that great work. That is what we're looking for. But this rune is so powerful that you can also use it as a means of defense. And I will invite you to remember this and to remember this conjuration, because at any time of danger, if you happen to be affected by forces of darkness and dark entities, you will take 3 fingers, your thumb, index, and middle finger, and if you put them together and you direct them to the tenebrous ones, you can trace the rune GIBUR. How do you do that? You trace it down, like that first arm, the horizontal, and then the vertical one. And you say, I conjure you in the name of Jupiter, Father of all gods, Tevigos Goslin. Samael says that those tenebrous ones, conjured with this power, they fall on their knees. Yes. I conjure you in the name of Jupiter, Father of all gods, Tevigos Goslin. Wow. That's what we do. And, dear friends, this is what we wanted to share with you today. I realize this has been a kind of a long lecture, but I am so grateful for your generosity and so happy that you found it interesting enough to stay with us to the end. Do we have any questions? Do you have any questions online? Good. If there are no questions, dear friends, our deepest gratitude goes to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. With this, we conclude our seminar on the magic of the runes. We will see you next time. May all beings be happy.